Hey guys, Spartan here, and welcome to a special video. In this video, as you can probably tell by the title, I am going to be ranking every trinket in Butcher's Circus. Now, this is based on usefulness, and, not necessarily potential, because I do understand that some of these trinkets have oh, this can potentially, really high roll, stuff like the Sharpening Stone. But no, I'm going to be talking about how useful they are, and I'm doing this in context of, once you have all of the trinkets, because obviously you're not going to have Materia Pestis when you start the game. In fact, it's like the last trinket you unlock. So, we're going to be going over every single trinket in order of least useful to most useful. Let's start. Now, first on the list, least useful trinket. Dun 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 dun. Gladiator's Mask. Gladiator's Mask is the worst trinket in Butcher's Circus. Now, it doesn't seem that bad. 15% damage, 3 crit. It's something you'd consider putting this on the leper, because 15% damage is a lot, and 3 crit is also a lot. There's a downside with the Gladiator's Mask, and it's literally just the Jagged Chopper, considering that leper only has melee skills. So, you can unlock the Gladiator's Mask and equip 2 Jagged Choppers, but that's literally the only reason you'd have it. And considering the leper needs accuracy, you are most likely not going to be using Jagged Chopper. Second on the list of worst is Sanity's Bane. It seems good, extra damage, accuracy, death blow chance, and stun chance versus Afflicted. That sounds pretty good. The downside of this is it's a win more trinket. As in, for the first few turns of the fight, it's going to be doing literally nothing. And usually, afflicted heroes aren't even the problem. As in, if a hero is afflicted, you usually kind of want to keep them alive because they screw up with your strategy. You'd rather focus on afflicting more enemy units, unless they're already on death's door or low health. In which case, Sanity's Bane, it's really not as helpful as you think it is. You'd rather just run something else to afflict them faster if that is your game plan. Third on the list of worst is the Arc of Life. So, why is the Arc of Life bad? Much like Sanity's Bane, it does absolutely nothing until your character gets to Death's Door, in which it grants 8% death blow resist and 10 dodge. That is honestly not a lot. This should be like 18% death blow resist. Then, maybe you'd use it on the Flagellant or something like that, or maybe even the Jester who has high dodge, but as it is, Arc of Life is completely useless. Next on the list is Hunter's Charm. Hunter's Charm suffers from being... Okay, it's an okay damage buff, and it does grant a little bit of accuracy, but the problem with Hunter's Charm is it is outclassed by pretty much every other damage-based trinket in the game. Most notably the Eagle Eye Talisman, but I'll get more into that once I go over the other trinkets, but just take note, Hunter's Charm, it's not that good. Up next is the Treated Bandage. Treated Bandage adds a bit of bleed and blight resist and increases the healing received. It doesn't sound that bad, but it's a defensive trinket, and defensive trinkets need to be pretty damn good, because in Darkest Dungeon, especially Butcher's Circus, offense is greatly more powerful than defense. So, Treated Bandage, 30% healing received is not 1/3, so if you are running, say, an Antiquarian who is running the healing move, it grants 3 HP every round. That's not going to be increased to 4. It's still going to be 3. So, yeah. Best run something else. Next is the Bloodstained Gambeson, which grants 8 max HP, which isn't bad, but that's essentially all it does. It's got 4 death blow resist, which is... that's 4% extra chance to resist a death blow. That is not as much as you think it would be. That's not enough to reliably do anything. Sure, you could use it on something like the Jester who has low health, or the Antiquarian, but why would you focus on tanking when you could focus on buffing their dodge so that there would be a higher chance for them not to be hit in the first place? Just crazy. Up next, in the same vein as Treated Bandage, we have the Invigorating Bomb, another leper trinket. It is slightly stronger with the resists, also grants death blow resist, but gives less healing received. This is a leper-only trinket that buffs bleed and blight resist, which, that is pretty good if you can stack it up with the leper's move that increases his protection and resistances. But if you wanted to resist Bleed and Blight, you might as well be running the Rancid Curl, so yeah, do not run Invigorating Bomb, it is not good. Up next on the list, we have the Last Breath Collar for the Flagellant. This is very much like the Ankh of Life, as it grants Deathblow resist and dodge at Death's Door, and increases the healing received if HP is below 20%. Generally, you do not want dodge as a Flagellant because you want it to be hit, but, you know, Death's Door is the one exception this time. However, dodge on the Flagellant is also kind of useless, considering if your Flagellant is afflicted, he loses 15 dodge, meaning that this would give him like 5 dodge net, so this is not very useful. The healing received, however, is good, and the Deathblow resist is enough for him to, you know, not be killed by a lot of things, with the exception of being, say, finishers and finish him, and maybe a strong Dirk stab. So it's definitely better than the Ankh of Life, but not by much. Up next is the Jagged Chopper, because it's just not very good. Extra damage in melee and extra crit is alright. Problem is, it is once again outclassed by pretty much everything else. So, yep, don't run Jagged Chopper, it's not that good. And up next is, I should stop saying up next, but you get the point, Purgation Talisman. This is a Vestal Trinket that increases damage and crit by a lot for melee skills, to which the Vestal has 1, Mace Bash. That 12 accuracy is pretty good, and the debuff skill chance is fine. But the thing is, with your Vestal, you generally don't want to be running Mace Bash. While it does have a decent amount of damage, you'd rather be running stuns, because the Vestal is probably one of the better stunning units in this game, you know, out of all 4 of them. So yeah, don't run Purgation Talisman, she really doesn't have enough survivability in the front lines anyway. Up next, Hazard Mask. 8 accuracy, 15 max HP, 15 healing received, 20 blight resist. So, one of the problems with this is it really doesn't do enough of anything to be warranted. 15% max HP on the Plague Doctor isn't much, considering the Plague Doctor has pretty low HP to begin with. Healing received is negligible, 8 accuracy is fine, but it's not going to win her any awards. And that's Blight Resist on a unit that has the highest Blight Resist in the game at 70, which 20 extra Blight Resist isn't really going to push you over any special thresholds or anything, so yeah, just don't bother with this one. First, Crusader Trinket, hooray, Battle-Scarred Helm. So, the Crusader has really pretty good bases that are boosted by the Battle-Scarred Helm. 5 protection, 15 max HP, 8 deathblow resist. The problem being that this is outclassed by the next trinket on this list, the Gladiator Helm, which provides extra protection and max HP, but doesn't give deathblow resist. So, the reason that the Gladiator Helm is better than the Battle-Scarred Helm is because the Gladiator Helm provides 10 protection, and the Battle-Scarred Helm provides 5. The Battle-Scarred Helm will bring the Crusader up to 20% protection, which is basically nothing when in consideration against, well, a certain other trinket that will be on this list later. But having 25% protection is a great deal better than having 20% protection. And the Gladiator Helm is also usable on all heroes, as in, you won't be using this much, but it's better than the Battle-Scarred Helm because it has more uses. Coming up on a controversial pick is the Nepenthe. Now, this reduces stress taken, increases virtue chance, and increases debuff resist. Virtue chance is basically a cursed mechanic. You either get lucky and win, or you get unlucky and die. However, Nepenthe does have some boosts. At minus stress taken is, in fact, no joke, especially when you buff it up with something like Bolster, and the debuff resist is effectively good against things like Bellow, or anything that debuffs you in reality. So, Nepenthe has some uses, but is usually too luck-based to actually consider running. Second Plague Doctor trinket, the Amputation Saw. Now, this has a really big problem, but it does have some benefits. It does have plus 30% damage for melee skills, which the Plague Doctor has 1, Incision. This is basically just meant for Incision anyway, because it increases bleed skill chance, and extra accuracy versus bleeding. The operative word being versus bleeding, as in, if you go for an Incision against a unit that is not bleeding, there's a decent chance that you will miss, considering Incision's accuracy is basically garbage. So, Amputation Saw, it would be good if it was plus accuracy melee skills instead of plus accuracy versus bleeding, but that implies that the Plague Doctor has any practical use in battle. Next up, Harlequin Mask, extra 20% max HP, although the Jester doesn't have much max HP, so this is better off. This would have been better off as just a flat HP increase of more. And on melee attack hit, self, stress -10. So this is meant to keep the Jester out of heart attack range, or affliction range. But the problem with that is, it's just not that good at doing it. Sure, it does work with Harvest to get 2 stress offs. But, yeah, Harlequin Mask just has too little impact, especially once you've used Finale. The Jester will definitely be getting that affliction, no matter what. Up next on the list of garbage is the Bleeding Skull for the Occultist, which increases his max HP by a decent percentage, once again being percentage on a unit with low health, 4 additional HP healed, but on heal, debuff target, -10% Deathblow resist. Now, this debuff is a 1,000,000% chance, meaning that you cannot resist it with anything, and it's a hard debuff, meaning it can't be removed with things like Rallying Flare. So, basically, what this thing is supposed to do is give some healing power to Stygian Embrace, not Weird Reconstruction, because you'd rather just get extra percentages on that with the Silver Syringe or something. Is this worth it? No, definitely not. That -10 Deathblow resist is effectively 2/3 of an extra attack against that unit, so yeah, Bleeding Skull, not very good. Don't use it. Now, sadly, on this list next we have the Infamous Visage. I really want this to work, but sadly it's a bit too underpowered to actually do anything. So what it does is, on melee attack hit, inflicts 15 stress. In theory, that is incredible. For, just add every single melee attack, just deals an extra 15% stress. And you deal extra accuracy, crit, and damage. 10 crit is also no joke. But much like Sanity's Bane, those effects only work on afflicted units. Sure, you can get that way through attacking with the Infamous Visage, but 15 stress is really not that much, considering the Bounty Hunter is not a stress unit. He has one attack that inflicts extra stress synergy, and that's Caltrops. But are you really going to be using Caltrops' Infamous Visage on the Bounty Hunter, or are you going for a Mark build, which is what he's used for? Most likely, you're going to be going for a Mark build. So, sorry Infamous Visage, you're just not viable enough right now. And next is the Sharpening Stone. The Sharpening Stone is not a bad thing. It is one of the many items on this list that will be classified as just a crit trinket, as in it applies a really good amount of crit, but that's not going to be enough to do much for the leper. On melee attack bleed, 100% base for 1 point for 3 rounds is alright, I guess. That 6 crit is usually what you're going to be trying to get with the leper, however, considering leper crits are deadly at least. But the problem is that the leper has such high demand for specific trinkets, the Sharpening Stone just does not get an opportunity to be used, considering leper needs accuracy, and leper needs remove resist badly. So, Sharpening Stone is being edged out by everything else. I guess it's just not the sharpest tool in the shed. And up next is the Scaled Shoulder, which grants protection, max HP, and deathblow resist at decent rates for the Shieldbreaker. Now, the problem with this is the Shieldbreaker is based around dodging attacks and blocking with her Aegis mechanic. So, extra protection and max HP don't do much for the Shieldbreaker. You'd be better off running dodge. So, that's pretty much it. Deathblow resist is nice, but usually when you see Shieldbreakers, they're going to die from either damage over time and just be stuck on death's door and unable to be healed off, or you're going to see them getting heart attack to death through the Aegis they have. So, yeah, sorry Scaled Shoulder, but not good enough. And next we have the Taste of Grandeur. Much like Nepenthe, this is a very weird trinket, especially with the on-attack miss, inflict 8 stress, meaning that if you run this trinket, you are going to need someone else to buff accuracy, even if you're running another accuracy trinket, which you most likely will be. That extra 10 damage and accuracy does help a little bit, and 25 virtue chance has been known to get you a win sometimes, but the problem with the Abomination is he usually becomes super stressed very quickly. He's usually the first to die from heart attack, so if you're running against a stress comp, Taste of Grandeur is most likely going to get you killed. Another Shieldbreaker trinket, the Fang Talisman. This is basically a Jagged Chopper, It works for all moves, not just melee, however, and you get an extra 10% damage versus Blighted. So against Blighted enemies, you get 25% damage and 3 crit. That's really not as much as you think it would be. Sure, you can use Impale to facilitate this Blight, but this really is not that good of a trinket. Scrolling down to the neutral trinkets once more, we have the Spiked Bat. It increases damage by 10 and gives you 20% bleed skill chance. It's not terrible, and it does have one very specific use. If you put this on a bounty hunter, then Caltrops will bleed every unit, because Caltrops has 150% bleed chance, and the Crusader has 70% bleed resist. So if you have a Spiked Bat, it goes up to 170%, meaning you will bleed that Crusader, and you cannot be screwed over by RNG in that manner. Coming up in number, I have no idea, is the Tincture of Iodine, which increases healing skills, reduces stress taken, cures blight, and gives a blight resist buff for the Arbalist's heal. No, not the Arbalist, the Musketeer. Now, this is worse than the Arbalist's trinket of the same nature because it cures blight, and you're usually not going to be seeing much blight. There's fair few abilities that even deal blight. I mean, this is a very specific counter trinket too. So you could run this, or you could run, say, an Arbalist and use her specific trinket, which is a lot better for reasons we'll get into when we get over that trinket. Have you ever wanted to be stun-locked? If you do, here's a perfect trinket for that, the Powder Flask for the Highwayman. This increases 20% damage for range skills, 15 accuracy, but lowers your stun resist to 0, essentially. Because the Highwayman only has 20% stun resist, so this is a very questionable trinket to take, because stun resist is... it's just a basic stat that everyone needs to have. If you do not have stun resist, you're going to get stun locked. Because, I mean, 50% stun resist after you get stunned is not enough to really resist, say, double stun Crusader, which is meta, by the way. So, if you want Highwaymen to die very quickly, this is the trinket for you. Up next on trinkets that don't really do anything is the Well-Tuned Lute. Extra stress relief skills and minus stress taken for the Jester. This is obviously to be used with Inspiring Tune to increase the stress removed from your friends, but there's a problem with that. There's a trinket that does something better, and it's neutral. So, yeah, Well-Tuned Lute, not very good, and we'll be going over that other trinket later. Up next, the Well-Balanced Stiletto. This is a very confusing trinket. It is probably the wordiest trinket on the list as well. Plus 10% damage on melee attack hit, buff self for 20% damage range skills and 6 crit range skills. And on range attack hit, buffs you for accuracy to melee skills and death blow chance for melee skills. This means that you want to be running a well-balanced lineup of melee and ranged. So, what's the problem with this? Well, it buffs accuracy for melee skills, to which the Grave Robber has very good accuracy with melee skills. And it buffs damage and crit for range skills, which they already have decent damage and crit. So, if these were switched, they would most likely be better. The high attack melee skills buffs the accuracy of the range skills, which in turn buff the damage and crit of the melee skills. That would be really good for lunge, but unfortunately, Well-Balanced Stiletto is balanced the wrong way around. It's too top heavy. Coming up next, the Tattered Shoe Toy. This increases the heal received with regeneration by 1 turn, increases healing received by a little bit, increases his stress skill when guarding, aka Cry Havoc, and just reduces stress taken. This is an alright trinket, it just doesn't do too much. If you really want extra rejuvenation, then run an Antiquarian and run her healing skill. Don't run this. Time for a trinket for the truly mad, that being the Madman's Collar. Increased healing receive, 30 bleed skill chance if afflicted, plus 25% damage if afflicted, plus 20% stress taken, and plus 100% heart attack stress heal. Now, what that means is, when he gets heart attacked, he will instead go to 140 stress instead of back to 170. Now, what is this trinket meant to do? It is meant to get him in heart attack range and constantly have heart attacks, healing his entire team, which is I mean, you'd have to be a complete madman to run this trinket, but it actually isn't that bad somehow. If you want a fun build that will definitely not win any matches, try out the Madman's Collar. You won't regret it. Right here is a good spot to place the Rotting Trophy. Most likely you'd use this early on because it does get outclassed by certain specific character trinkets, but extra stress dealt, extra blight skill chance is good for units such as the Antiquarian, maybe even the Plague Doctor, the Abomination, anyone that does blight and stress at the same time, but honestly, that's all of them. Blight is generally stressing. I'm pretty sure the only unit that does not stress while blighting is units with Hemlock or the Shieldbreaker. Remember the well-tuned loot? Well, here's the Brass Bugle, a neutral trinket that you can start off the game with one of, and it increases your stress relief skills by 50%. That is actually quite a bit. It turns Inspiring Cry into a heal for 45, and sure, you're not going to go against like a whole stress it team like with this. But it was used in a certain Darkest Dungeon Butcher Circus tournament in the winning fight of the final match. So yeah, pay respects to the Brass Bugle. It's a bit better than you think it is. In the same vein as the Brass Bugle, we have the Glorious Standard, which increases healing skills, stress relief skills, move resist, and reduces stress taken for the Crusader. This is a lot more important than you think, considering that the Crusader has essentially no move resist. He is very easy to move around at like 25% move resist. So getting an extra 30 means the Crusader is going to be planted against the ground pretty thoroughly, and won't be screwed over so greatly by a Leper using Purge, or an Abomination using Slam, or anything like that. The stress release skills and healing skills is pretty decent, I guess, if you're going to run Control Crusader, which isn't very viable, trust me, I've tried. But it is decent, I guess. Minus stress taken is a bit of an overlooked stat, however. Next is the Impulsible Glyph, the Antiquarian trinket that boosts stress dealt, debuff skill chance, and accuracy. This isn't a bad trinket, especially since it's a base accuracy increase and stress dealt, but that debuff skill chance is only for one move, that being Flash Powder, which reduces accuracy by, I believe, 15. Doesn't last too long, but it's a decent debuff. And, yeah, this is just unremarkable. However, that stress dealt is no joke, and as I said before, base accuracy increases are pretty good. So you may consider running this, I guess. Coming in hot is the Silver Syringe. Increases healing skills. That's essentially all it does. So this really only has one use. This is basically an occultist only trinket by the end of the game, because everybody has a healing skill trinket that has a healing skill, except the Abomination, pretty much. So if you want good healing on Weird Reconstruction, run this, and maybe you'll get it. Maybe. Coming in hot is the Survivor's Eye Patch for the Man-at-Arms. Increases dodge, blight resist, and increases healing received when guarding. Now, you may consider, why would you run this? Well, considering the fact that Bolster grants 10 dodge, this grants an extra 12 dodge, and you can run a Monkey's Paw to grant an extra 15 dodge, the Man-at-Arms can actually become a very dodgy unit, and making your entire team dodgy with a dodge build, with a unit that can also reduce damage on, attacks, is fairly good. So, Survivor's Eye Patch, it's good in my book. The Blight Resist is honestly not enough to give extra Blight Resist to the Man-at-Arms, the unit who has 5 Blight Resist, the lowest in the game. So, yep, Survivor's Eye Patch, it's decent. We are officially getting into the part where I would consider running these trinkets. Coming in hot, as I've said before, the Viper Spear Tip for the Shieldbreaker. Base 10 accuracy increase and an extra 20% blight skill chance. So, one of the best blight moves in the game is Adder's Kiss, which is a 5 points of blight damage for 5 rounds. That is 25 points of blight damage, and if it crits, that's going to be 35 points of blight damage. True, it has low accuracy, but that's where the accuracy boost kicks in. So if you want to whittle your opponent down over 5 turns with Adder's Kiss, or impale your opponent to death with good chance to blight them, run the Viper Spear Tip. It's not that bad. Next up, the Grim Bandana increases damage, crit, stress dealt at the cost of stress taken. This is obviously used for Grape Shot Blast, in which extra crit is pretty good on moves that hit multiple enemies. The stress dealt is nice, because I mean, Grapeshot Blast does a lot of stress damage, in case you haven't noticed. Damage is alright, considering that it takes an enemy down to low health and inflicts stress damage, so it's good in my book. Grim Bandana, it's pretty viable. A basic, a classic, the Carnival Mask. 20% stress dealt and 4 accuracy. Simple, effective. Run it if you have no better trinkets to run for a stress unit. Up next, Numbing Incense. Minus 35% stress taken. Minus 35% stress taken. 20% stun resist at the cost of 4 dodge. Now, this is one of the most overlooked trinkets in the game that I think is actually really good. That stress resist taken is like, that's crazy high. If you run this along with a Gauntlet of Absolution on the Flagellant is not going to be getting a heart attack anytime soon, and can pretty much solo stress comps. So, why do people not run this? I'm pretty sure people just forget that it exists. I mean, that 20% stun resist is also pretty good, and that 4 dodge, it's not that much of a, it's not that much of a loss. So, Numbing Incense, pretty decent. Up next, we actually have 2 trinkets, that being the Weighted Bolus and the Buckshot Cartridge. Why? They're essentially the same thing, they're just for the Arbalist and the Musketeer. So, move skill chance is actually pretty good, considering that Bolus has 85% move skill chance, same as Buckshot. So that turns up to 115% move skill chance, which can deposition very, very nicely. 20% debuff skill chance, that is more applicable to the Musketeer than the Arbalist, because the Arbalist's debuff skill, it isn't really that good unless you're fighting a pure stress comp. In which case, yeah, sure. But that debuff that you get from Smokescreen, that minus crit and accuracy, is really good. Plus 12 accuracy, that's also a very good accuracy base increase. So, yes. You wouldn't really run these, but they are very good. We'll get into why later. Up next is the Gleaming Breastplate. 15% protection, 8 deathblow resist, and minus 4% crits received. That minus 4 crits received may seem innocuous, but that is actually very, very good, considering that's going to save the Vestal from a lot of stress and dots if, units get lucky against her. And yeah, that's pretty good. 15% protection, that's fine. I would run this if I was running a Vestal or a tank build. Next up, the Veteran's Gauntlet, another trinket that is deceptively good. Now, extra damage, stun/daze skill chance, which is basically, well, no, I'll get into that in a bit. And move skill chance, and on melee attack hit, daze, 50% chance, for 1 round, obviously. Now, that last bit is basically, if you're going to use Retribution or Crush for some reason, and you hit like a Jester, you're going to be able to daze them. Well, a decent amount of time. It's not very useful against other units, but it's essentially just Jester Destroyer. This is essentially just a Rampart boost. And there is one bad part of this, however, which means it would not be higher on the list. It buffs stun skill chance. Now, what you may be thinking, the Man-at-Arms has no stun skill. Yeah, Man-at-Arms actually does have a stun skill in Butcher's Circus. His Affliction Act Out. If the Man-at-Arms gets afflicted and gets abusive, or irrational, or paranoid, there is a good chance that he will, at some point, attack a friendly unit and try to stun them. And that boosts his stun skill chance up to 120%, meaning that's a very hard thing to resist. So Veteran's Gauntlet can bite you in the arse if you get afflicted. Be wary of this. Coming up from the depths is the Calling Saltays. Yeah, it's a bit of a weird name. Damage, crit, range skills, increases damage and accuracy versus marked. This is a bit of a weird one, but it does have merit, considering getting a crit with Abyssal Artillery, or Demon's Pull, or just basically any hex, that adds quite a bit more stress and debuff skill chance, move skill chance, and adds an extra turn on Horror. So Calling Salts, while usually not the best choice, it's viable. You could use it. And the extra accuracy and damage versus marked is nice to have. Also synergized with another trinket he has. Next up, the Ghoul Claw. This is a very weird trinket, but it has merit. Plus 10 base accuracy, and grants an extra 25% damage and crit to melee skills, to which the Antiquarian has 1, and it inflicts 6 horror for 3 rounds on said melee skill. Now, that's 18 stress, it's a decent damage and crit, and if it does crit, that's an extra turn of horror. This is actually a viable trinket, especially if it doesn't force you to use Nervous Stab. You can still use Festering Vapors for the Blight, just with higher accuracy. So yeah, Ghoul Claw, it's pretty good. Next up, the Reaper Shroud. This is basically the Jagged Chopper, but it adds an extra 20% accuracy when their HP is low, kind of like the finisher. So if you really wanted to not miss a unit on Death's Door, say like a dodgy Jester or a Shield Breaker who has used up her Aegises but still has the dodge buff, run Reaper Shroud plus Finisher and you will be able to kill them with a good Dirk Stab. Also, damage and crit is, I guess, nice for the Jester. Coming up next is the Durable Armlet. This marks the last Leper Trinket. 10% max HP, which is a decent amount, it's about 6 HP, and 12 accuracy, which the Leper surely needs. This is a good trinket. Most people do run this if they're running Leper, but yeah, the problem is, it's a Leper trinket, and the Leper has very specific needs for trinkets. So there is a good chance you'll cut the Durable Armlet, but it's fine if you really need accuracy. Next up, Executioner's Halberd. It's a Jagged Chopper that adds Death Blow dealt chance. In combination with Wicked Hack, which is the Hellion's base skill, that is, like, what, plus 50% total Death Blow dealt chance? It's pretty good, if it hits. Next up, the Idol of Purity. 33% healing skills and minus 15% stress taken. It's a straight up healing buff that reduces stress taken. It's pretty good. You should probably use it. From the underwhelming to the overwhelming is the Duelist Pistol. Plus 10% damage range skills, plus 5 crit base, plus 30% move skill chance, and plus 10 accuracy if in position 1. This is obviously, plain and simple, a point-blank shot trinket. It's meant to use with point-blank shot and kill your opponent in a good, strong hit. But that accuracy in position 1 is, sure, it's conditional, but it does work whenever he's in position 1, aka, if he's in position 2, uses Duelist Advance, he will have plus 10 accuracy for as long as he stays there. So that riposte can get extra accuracy, and it is still plus 5 crit for everything, not just range skills. So consider running this trinket if you need to get some crits off. It's pretty good for that. Next up, Cloak and Dagger. Extra damage melee skills, extra death blow melee skills, plus 20 dodge while stealthed, and bypasses guard while stealthed. Now, the dodge while stealth may seem a bit superfluous, considering they're stealth, not going to be hit by much. But that also works for attacks that hit everybody, and with the Grave Robber's high dodge, she can actually dodge moves that would de-stealth her otherwise with this dodge. Meaning, Rallying Flare and Musket Shot, or whatever it's called, Flash Powder, they all have a decent chance of missing her, meaning that you can keep that stealth. So it's a very much investment move. Plus, bypassing guard is always good. That's why certain trinkets are very high up on the list. Next up, the Akron Vial, which buffs stress dealt, debuff skill chance, and move skill chance. You may not see people using this trinket much, but it is very good if you can get lucky. This is essentially very good with Disorienting Blast. It can move an Arbalist from the back ranks to the front ranks, meaning that your Plague Doctor instantly, if you're lucky. Also, Blinding Gas, it's a pretty good debuff. It does a lot of stress. Akron Vial just buffs that. So yeah, it's not terrible. Back into neutral territory, we have the Rancid Curl. 40% bleed, blight, and 30 debuff resist. Is pretty good on units that have low resistances, but also pretty good on units that have high resistances that you just want to make sure they do not get bled or blighted. Most notably, you can stack this on a Crusader and he will not be bled by much. Sure, he can be hit by Hound's Harry, but not much else is going to bleed him, and very few people use blight. The debuff resist is also nice. So if you need resistances, Rancid Curl's the word. Next up we have my hand, aka the Hand of Glory. Extra stress dealt, and extra debuff skill chance. If you're running debuffs, or hexes, weakening curse, vulnerability curse, it's pretty good. 20% stress dealt on a move that does 30 by default, increases it to 36. So Yep, it's good. Also makes sure that you can debuff units for removing protection or removing dodge. It's pretty good. Confessor's Gauntlet comes up, and it is a very dividing trinket. It does grant 6 base accuracy, and it increases damage and crit versus bleeding. This is basically what the Hacksaw from the Plague Doctor should have been. Now, this damage and crit with bleeding seems... sure, it sounds good. And the reason is, it actually is. It's really good. So, what this is supposed to do is use it and use Rain of Sorrows in the back lines. You get them all bleeded, and then you hit them again, and most likely score a crit. Now, what that does is it grants the Flagellant a boost of bleed skill chance by 20% for his next turn, meaning that you can use this to carry a bleed towards a unit such as the Crusader, because then you'll be a 50-50 chance of doing it. So, Confessor's Gauntlet, along with just increasing accuracy, pretty good for bleeding. Next up, the Bone Vest, which increases protection, stress dealt, deathblow resist, and stress taken. This is essentially your go-to choice if you're running Barbaric Yorp Hellion, which is an odd choice, but there's no reason not to do it if you're running Hellion. I mean, there's not many other Hellion builds that are viable. Up next, Class with the Beast, 10 protection, 10 max HP, on melee attack hit, inflicts stress plus 5. This is usually used in combination with skills like Rake to inflict an extra 10 stress, maybe score a crit or 2, and yeah, that protection and HP is nice. It's a fine trinket. Back to Hellion trinkets, we're not moving around much here. Razor Pin, 10 base accuracy and 20 bleed skill chance. If you want to use bleed out, or if it bleeds, you need this trinket because they have garbage accuracy by default, which is actually the main flaw of the Hellion. It's not her low move resist, it's not her low resistances to bleed and blight, it's her low accuracy. So Razor Pin means she's not dead on arrival with her moves. Next up, we went over Iodine before, but now it's time for the Medic's Full Plate. Extra healing and stress taken reduction, just like the Iodine, but this one grants extra protection. Considering the Arbalist has 5 base protection, getting up to 20 is a decent thing to do, although we wish it was higher than 20 because of reasons we all know. But Medic's Full Plate, it's a fine choice if you want to stay alive. Now we are back to the Bounty Hunter with the Bounty Notice, extra damage, accuracy, and crit versus marked. Considering the Bounty Hunter's marked skills have very high accuracy, the accuracy of, you only get the accuracy against a certain enemy is not really a problem. 20% damage and 10 accuracy is really good. 4 crit is just fine. It fits with the Bounty Hunter's playstyle. What are you gonna do? Now, all these 3 against marked seems like, you know, a bit contrived, but what if you could just get them by default? Ladies and gentlemen, the Eagle Eye Talisman. Basically, one of the better neutral trinkets. It's just a flat 10 accuracy, 10 damage for everything for anyone. If you need accuracy, you can run this, or you could run a contrived other thing. But basically, Eagle Eye Talisman is one of the top neutral trinkets that you start the game with. From accuracy to dodge, we have the Black Diamond Mirror. Increases max HP by 15% and dodge by 15 at the cost of some stress taken. You're gonna run Dodge Antiquarian? Well, this is the trinket for you. That's all there is to say, really. Up next, the Sturdy Buckle. 4 dodge, 15 max HP, minus 10 stress taken, and 30 stun resist, all upsides. The downside of this trinket, however, is that 50% stun resist is not as high as you think it is. There's a decent chance that he'll be stunned, and, I mean, 4 dodge isn't too much. 15% max HP isn't that much on a Highwayman. The stress taken reduction is nice, but sure, it's a jack-of-all-trades, master-of-none trinket. If you'd rather specialize in a certain field, don't run this. But it's fine, there's no reason not to run it. Up next, Heartseeker. Plus 25% damage melee skills and plus 10 death blow dealt chance. I've seen people running the Heartseeker instead of the finisher, which I am honestly confused by that choice, but hey, plus 25% damage melee skills, it's not bad. Here we have the Blood Red Coin. plus 20% bleed skill chance, plus 25% damage versus bleeding, and plus 10 accuracy versus bleeding. This has a bit of the same problem as the Hacksaw has, but the upside to this is that the Jester has a lot more moves that are, fully damage-based. Especially this does buff Finale's damage by 25% versus bleeding. The bleed skill chance is actually really good, considering Harvest is a multi-targeting one, so extra bleed skill chance is really good. And the accuracy versus bleeding isn't really a problem, considering the Jester can buff his own accuracy and everyone's accuracy with Battle Ballad. So, yep, Blood Red Coin, pretty good. And we have the final Plague Doctor trinket, the Volatile Concoction, aka the trinket that makes the Plague Doctor not dead on arrival. So, it's 20% Blight skill chance and plus 15 accuracy. So, everyone knows the Plague Doctor has garbage accuracy from pretty much every. Volatile Concoction having 15 accuracy is basically what means the Plague Doctor won't miss every hit. So, yeah, you're going to want to run this on every single Plague Doctor you have, or you're not running Plague Doctor correctly. Next up, the Eerie Eye. 12 accuracy, 20 debuff scale chance, and ignores stealth with all moves. So, this is actually a really good trinket, not just for the accuracy and debuff skill chance, but that ignoring stealth is much more impactful than you think it would be. It means you can pull a Grave Robber out of the back ranks who has used Shadow Fade, you can shoot a Antiquarian that has recently used Take Cover after you've marked them with a Come Hither. It's just a very good trinket, which more people should run. I'm surprised people don't run the Eerie Eye on their Arbalist or Musketeer to get back at those Antiquarians who like to use Take Cover. I'd like you for a minute to look at this net that I have just found. When I say go, get ready to use Puncture to pull the back ranks to the front ranks constantly. 6 accuracy is pretty good, and 20 move skill chance is also fairly good. This is very good on units such as the Abomination if you want extra accuracy over other benefits from the Shattered Padlock. It's good on the Leper, because it grants accuracy and buffs Purge. It's just a generally good trinket. If you want moves, use this if your character does not have a move-specific personal trinket. Into Grave Robber territory once again with the Leather Bandolier, 10 damage range skills, 8 dodge, 5 crit. This is really good if you want to land a crit and pretty much end the game instantly with things such as the good old blighting skills, the lunge, and 8 dodge is good enough for the Grave Robber to run it pretty much, constantly. That's pretty much what the Grave Robber needs, dodge. And damage is nice, so yeah, Leather Bandolier, really good. Really close to that too is the Padded Arm Guard, which grants 12 dodge, 33 guard duration, and plus 15% protection when guarded. This is for, obviously, the dodge tank Houndmaster. There's just really nothing wrong with this trinket. It's good. You should probably run it. Speaking of dodge, we have the Graceful Anklet, a shield breaker only trinket that grants 15 dodge and 4 accuracy. What more can you say about a trinket that buffs the dodge on an already dodgy unit, other than bring it so that you won't be hit? It's pretty good. So, yeah, Graceful Anklet, high in the ranking. Next up we have the Crittens, as I call them, the Savage Gauntlets. 8 accuracy, 5 crit, 25% damage if afflicted, which honestly is not that good, and 15% stress taken. The Hellion, as I've said before, has garbage accuracy, so buffing that accuracy up is really good, and getting 5% extra crit is really nice. Combine this with the hairpin, or just the pin itself, it's a hairpin, you'll get 18 accuracy, extra crit, extra bleed skill chance. Maybe you can actually make the bleed skills useful. But other than that, yeah, it's probably the best Hellion trinket. Next up, Materia Pestis, the Antiquarian's trinket that buffs Blight skill chance and Blight duration. This is the only trinket that actually buffs the duration of a damage over time effect, because Horror does not count. So what this does is it turns your Festering Vapors from a potential 24 damage to a potential 32 damage. That is, of course, if you don't crit at all. So, it's pretty good. This is definitely my go-to antiquarian damage trinket, because it is much more effective than you would think, especially considering that the antiquarian is usually not a damage dealer. Huh. Coming up to the spike, another very late game unlock. It buffs your riposte's damage, accuracy, and crit by 25% of damage, 10 accuracy, and 8 crit. That is a huge amount. And plus, on riposte hit, it bleeds them for 1 point for 4 rounds. That's just an extra 4 points of damage. So, yeah, this is pretty good. This is enough to deter Hound's Harriers. Or at least, usually it is. So, having some defense against that is very good. Next up is the Sacrificial Chris for the Occultist. 20% damage melee skills, 10 accuracy melee skills, plus 25% stress dealt versus marked, plus 10% death blow chance versus marked, and melee hits mark the target. This is an incredible trinket for the Occultist. Like, this makes Sacrificial Stab so powerful. Like, you have no idea how good this is in the right comp. This is enough to kill certain units in one hit. Well, in combination with a move that capitalizes on mark. But, in itself, it's just generally really good. Like, wow, it covers all the bases. It has no downside. What's up with this trinket? Coming up to the Shattered Padlock. 10 damage melee skills. 15% move skill chance. 3 crit on everything. Non-melee attack hit. Bleed. 120% base. 1 point for 2 rounds. So that's basically used for Rake. So Rake and Slam are hugely buffed by this. Slam, of course, more so than Rake, but Shattered Padlock, it's no joke. It has a good chance to bleed every unit in the game, including Crusader. Shattered Padlock, it's okay in my book. Next up, the Crown of Thorns, plus 15 accuracy, plus 15% damage while bleeding, 15% damage taken while bleeding, and on attack hit, bleed yourself for 50% chance for 2 points for 3 rounds. You may think that that would be bad, but honestly, it brings the Flagellant down into healing areas a lot faster. Which, hey, that's pretty good if you're the Flagellant. And that accuracy is really good considering some of the Flagellant's moves have very low accuracy, especially Exsanguinate. Next up, another neutral trinket, the Crimson Hook. 25% stress dealt versus bleeding, 15% bleed skill chance, and 3 crit. Most people see this on the Houndmaster. I personally like to run it on the Flagellant. It's just a very good trinket. If you want stress, if you want bleed. Hell, I've seen people run it on the Man-at-Arms while they have other units that bleed, just for the extra stress dealt. It's a really good trinket. Speaking of the Houndmaster, however, we have the Training Whistle. 15% damage versus marked, 15% range skills, and 8 crit range skills. This is probably the most underutilized trinket in the game, considering that 8 crit on Hound's Harry, a move that hits all enemies, is insane. That's a crazy amount of crit to add up. That's effectively an extra 32% chance to score a crit on any unit. But, I mean, getting massive crits with the Training Whistle, wow. Some people don't like to run this trinket, by the way. It confuses me. Speaking of crits, the Parrying Dagger for extra 10 damage melee skills, 5 accuracy melee skills, 30% bleed skill chance, 10 riposte damage, and 3 riposte crit. This is a very, very good trinket. Like, you're obviously going to run this every time you run Riposte Highwayman. It's too good. I just have nothing bad to say about this trinket. It's awesome. It's amazing. Up next, we have the Grappling Mitts for the Bounty Hunter. Extra move, stun, / daze chance, and 8 base accuracy. That's really good. Especially considering that the Bounty Hunter's main move is the Come Hither. You'll see that every turn on turn 1. Unless, of course, they go for a Caltrops play. Final Occultist Trinket, the Fleshbound Grimoire. 15 accuracy range skills, 20 move skill chance, and 33% horror duration. That's effectively +1 turn. But yes, this is a really, really good trinket. 15 accuracy range skills is, well, all of his skills are range skills, except for the stab. So, yeah, 15 base accuracy, that is crazy good. Of course, his pull gets a lot more powerful, and he becomes a much better stress dealer. Yeah, this is also an amazing trinket. Tears of the Lost is next. 30% virtue chance, that's higher than Nepenthe. minus 15% stress taken, plus 20% debuff resist, and plus 33% restoration duration. This is essentially Nepenthe but better for the Antiquarian. And her heal was already amazing. Tears of the Lost just makes it so much better. Next up, the Kite Shield, aka the Protector's Kite. 5% protection, 15% max HP, and 33% guard duration. With this, you can do 2 moves in between every protection, instead of just having to use Guard, aka Defender, like Command or Bellow, Defender, Bellow, Defender, Bellow. It lasts for an extra turn. That's really good. Next up is a trinket that everybody runs some point or later, the Exotic Snuff. Do you know this increases damage by 10% when acting first? A lot of people don't. This also decreases accuracy by 4, but mostly it increases stun and move resist by 30%. If you're running Leper, you need this. If you're running Flagellant, you most likely will need this. If you're running Arbalist, you may want to use this so you don't get pulled. It's just generally... It's sad that this is kind of a necessary trinket most of the time. Because it isn't really that good, but stun is just that powerful. Coming up, more Crusader stuff, we have the Writ of Execution. 10% damage, 8 accuracy, 15% stress dealt, and 10 death blow dealt chance. This is a crazy good trinket, not just from the accuracy and damage, which almost alone rivals the Hunter's Charm, or the Eagle Eye Talisman, in fact. That stress dealt is no joke with Zealous Accusation, and death blow dealt chance is always a good thing to have. Super powerful trinket that you can unlock fairly early on. Up next, Satchel of Dirty Tricks, 10 accuracy, 4 dodge, 20% blight skill chance, extra stress dealt. This is basically meant for blighting daggers, or whatever it's called, I forget. Because, I mean, that move isn't good enough on its own, is it? I mean, with this blight skill chance buff, it's not going to miss anyone except maybe the Plague Doctor on rarely. But yeah, it's a good trinket, especially with the extra dodge. Coming up next is the Brass Knuckles, because stun is powerful. That's essentially the only reason this is on the list up so high. Stun is powerful. Use it. Coming up to the Gauntlet of Absolution, 33% healing skills, 10 prot. On being hit, you remove 10 stress from the Flagellant. As I said before, you can combine this with the Numbing Incense, and the Flagellant will essentially not get afflicted. Ever. It is a really good combo that most people should use. Also, extra healing on such high heals such as the Flagellant, really good. So yeah, you will see this run a lot. For a good reason, it's that good. Next up, a classic, fan of Hellions and Jesters, it is the Crushed Hemlock. Plus 20% blight skill chance, and on melee attack hit, blight 100%, 2 points for 2 rounds. That blight skill chance buff does not work on the effect here that says on melee hit blight. So, what does this do? Well, you can pretty much just cross out the extra blight skill chance thing. You'll never see that actually work. What this is used for is the Flagellant, Jester, and Hellion use their moves that hit many units, and applies an extra 4 points of blight damage to everyone hit. It's essentially all this is, but it is good enough to be used very, very constantly. Another neutral trinket, the Pit Fighters Helm, 20% protection plus 10% stress dealt. As I've said, 20% protection is the low end of the protection thing for reasons we will see soon. And the stress dealt is very nice. You can stack this on the Man-at-Arms and start bellowing away, because it gets him to the 30% threshold, which is enough, usually. And it does benefit his guarding abilities, so yep, really good item. Speaking of Bellow Bot Man-at-Arms, we have the Insignia of Rank up next. You know, this was originally meant for Crush synergy with that debuff skill chance. Well, that's what it is. 12 accuracy and 3 crit, 20% debuff skill chance, and on attack crit, it buffs the party for 8 accuracy. Now, you could use this as it's intentionally used for, with Crush and Rampart, to get accuracy buffs to your party, or you could just Bellow with it, because Bellow is a debuff too. And that's usually what most people use it for. So, yep, it's a Bellow bot trinket. It's good though. Next up, the Spiked Chain. Extra 20% damage range skills, 15 stun chance, and 20 blight skill chance. This is mostly just used for stunning though. Let's be real. I mean, sure, you can use Beast's Bile and get some blight off, but yeah, you're going to use this for stunning. Alright, coming up to a fan favorite, it is the finisher. Plus 25% death blow dealt chance and plus 20% accuracy, well, plus 20 accuracy versus HP below 40%. This means that units on death's door, high chance that you're going to straight up kill them. It turns every move into a 50-50 unless you're fighting a flagellant. And yeah, that's even without skill buffs. Use this with finish him and you pretty much kill anyone on death's door. It is a really good trinket that you should consider running if you really want to kill units. The only problem is it does nothing for the first half of the fight. Also, you'd think, but that 20 accuracy versus HP below 40% is really good. It's mostly ignored, however. Next up we have two trinkets. Why? Because they're essentially the same thing. The Piercing Quarrel and the Mini Ball, if I'm pronouncing it correctly. 10% damage and crit. These units only have ranged skills, so that's the reason why. And 20% armor piercing. This is the reason why you want to get over 20% protection, because these trinkets will just ignore them if you have only 20%. So, what's to be said about a unit that has a base 10 crit getting an extra 7% crit? A lot, actually. It's too much to have. This trinket is honestly a bit too powerful. And it's kind of weird that it only gets number 7 on the list of popularity, but yep, it's really good. And finally, before the top 5, we have Tome of Fury, plus 15% accuracy, range skills, plus 40% debuff skill chance, which you'll never see in use, and plus 30 stun skill chance on a unit that has a very, very accurate stun skill that can be used from ranks 4, 3, and 2, and hits ranks 1, 2, and 3. The Vestal didn't need this. This is the only way you actually see Vestals on ladder, however, is with Tome of Fury and stun botting. So we have reached the top 5 trinkets. Here we go with number 5. What is it going to be? It is going to be Sacred Blade. 15% damage melee skills, 20% stun chance, 30 virtue chance. I've seen Crusaders take home matches from getting a virtue and powering through stun comps and bleed comps, blight comps. Those resistances are just good enough. And stunning, it's really powerful in Butcher's Circus, as we've said. And the extra damage melee skills means that your Crusader will be dealing good damage to the opponent while they're stunning them. So you're getting progress and stalling theirs. Number 4 on the list is the Wretches Cloak for an extra 10 accuracy, 20% stress dealt, and 33% horror duration. The downside of this trinket was supposed to be the stress dealt also works on the stress the abomination deals to itself, but that's not really much, considering that you add an extra 8 stress on all enemy units just from transforming with this trinket. It is really good, and it makes the abomination one of the better units in the game. Alone. Number 3, we have a trinket you'll see run on pretty much every dodgy unit, that being the Monkey's Paw. 15 dodge, 8 accuracy, at the cost of 3% chance to receive extra crits, and 10% stress taken. These usually don't matter though, however, since your unit will most likely be dodging every single hit. If you are, of course, lucky, or have the right build. But Monkey's Paw, it's really good, and that extra accuracy is a fair amount, so don't misjudge that. Number 2, we have the Attack Whistle for the Houndmaster. The trinket that pretty much solely pushes Hound's Harry, which is the only real reason you run Houndmaster other than dodge tanking. 20 bleed skill chance and 10 accuracy. It's simple and effective. Considering that Hound's Harry already has 110% bleed skill chance, this pushes up to 130, meaning you are more likely than not going to bleed the Crusader. AKA, half the units in the roster had literally no chance to resist this bleed if it hits. So yeah, Attack Whistle, it's really good. Now, if you've been keeping track, you know what trinket is coming up at number 1. That's right, it is of course the Sanity's Bane Stabilizing Tiller and the Iron Sights. Why? Because they're exactly the same trinket. Extra damage and accuracy when acting last is not that major, it is still a good boost. Extra damage and crit versus marked, however, is. But the main reason you run this, bypass guard versus marked, meaning that if a unit is marked, there is very little they can do to escape your righteous fury of this horribly powerful trinket. This one trinket alone kills the man-at-arms in this matchup, and all you need to do is a little bit of a mark. That's it. You combine Iron Sights or Stabilizing Tiller with the Eerie Eye, pretty much no unit can escape, with the exception of a Flagellant using Suffer. And that's it. That is all of the trinkets on the list for best. And that ends this list of all trinkets ranked in Butcher Circus from worst to best. Is there any trinket you believe deserved a higher spot, or maybe even a lower spot if you hate the Stabilizing Tiller? I'd like to know in the comments below. But until next time, I'm the Real Spartan. Remember to blah 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 whatever whatever. I'll see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.